Over the past month, we have looked at the home, and this is the third and last part of the series. Next week, we are going to begin a series on Christmas. We already have some of the decorations and everything up, and we're gearing up for that Christmas time. But this week is on the home. So far, our focus has been on marriage, but today we're going to take a brief look at parenting. Again, there's no way you can cover everything on marriage and parenting in a short 3-week period of time. The picture that we've been using, the graphic that we've been using is what is up behind me, and it is it's a very cute picture and everything. But the problem is with that picture is that family just isn't that easy. Family is more complicated than that. And if you were together with family at Thanksgiving, you understand that family is more complicated than just a little picture on the screen. And maybe for some, family is really a complete burden in your life. Just getting together is not a blessing, it's a burden. And I feel bad for that. But I want you to know that family doesn't have to be a burden, it can be a blessing. And God gave children to us, as I read during the dedication, as a gift. He gave children to us to be a blessing to the family and not to be a burden. Even though family is difficult, the Bible gives us some principles to have a functioning and fun family. What's that? Oh, dysfunctional. Every family is dysfunctional in some way. I mean, every family. But there is the potential and the possibility by following God's guidelines to have a functional and a fun family. But we have to put God first and follow His word, and then He will be there to help us every step of the way. So our passage for today is from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. It says, "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Children, obey your parents, for you belong to the Lord, and this is the right thing to do." Verse 2, "Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth." Verse 4, and lastly, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." So we're just going to follow this through. I have 2 main points and some sub-points. The first main point is for children, because that's what it says. Children, obey your parents. I learned that children obey your parents in the Lord, but it's because you belong to the Lord. Well, how long do we have to obey our parents? I think the Christian example and the biblical example is this. You obey your parents as long as you live in their home and until you get married, until you leave your mother and father and cleave to your spouse. Then obedience is just a part of family life. One of the most important things parents of younger children can teach your parents or teach your children is to obey. Obey. You're the authority in their life. Children are unable to make proper decisions on their own. I'm talking about younger children up until their teenage years. You are the authority in their life. There are stages of raising children. In the first few years, you discipline the children so that they learn that life. And I'll draw the distinction between discipline and punishment in that discipline is a way of life. Discipline is how we live our lives. It's time to go to bed. It's time to get up. It's time to take a bath. It's time to eat. That's a disciplined life. Punishment is when the child gets off track a little bit, and we need to get them back on the path. That's what punishment is. Discipline is a way of life. Punishment is when the child gets off track. Now, I don't know if I'll get to this later, but let me throw this out to you, parents. There's a difference between a child being a child and an accident and willful disobedience. See, a child, and I always use this example, a child might spill their milk at the table because they're a child. They reach for something and they spill it. That's not the time for punishment. Okay? The time for punishment is when you tell the child, don't spill your milk, and they pick it up and they look you in the eye and they turn it upside down. See, there's a big difference between an accident and willful disobedience. Willful disobedience demands punishment because they're not going to learn what's right and what's wrong. Now, some children are just defiant by nature, and God bless you in that. Some children are stronger-willed. God bless you in that. God has given you the task to be the disciplinarian in your home. Again, be careful, because an accident that's punished will hurt the child's heart, okay? I think it's okay for willful disobedience to hurt the child's behind, okay? Not in a vicious and in a brutal way. I don't believe in any type of abuse, never smacking, hitting in the face, anything like that. As a little pat take cares of a lot of problems, Now, that's the early stage. The next stage of their life, maybe till, I don't know, there's not a direct thing. Every child's different. 6 or 7 years old, up through 10, 11, you model how you want them to live. And then when they become teenagers, you negotiate because they're developing their own ideas and everything. But watch how this plays out. If you never disciplined your children and you didn't model how they want to live, then God bless you during the teenage years. See? If you're starting with teenagers, it's not too late. With God, all things are possible, but it will take a miracle. Okay? So you start young, disciplining your children. I'm not talking about, anything harsh. I'm talking about just establishing the pattern. And for us, first of all, I should have said this. Dory should be teaching this and not me. I've learned more from her in doing that. She is the strength and the rock behind the scenes. Whatever you hear me say is just because I'm the public person in our relationship, but she's the rock in our home with the children and everything. But anyway, one of the first things that you'll have to establish, and I know this is hard because children are so cute and wonderful and all of that, is the first thing, this is from experience, is they will have to learn to fall asleep on their own. Not as an infant, but as they get older. If you don't teach them that they have to fall asleep on their own, listen, I'm just going to speak very clearly. They will own you. They will own you. Little children are in a union, and they have a handbook that they have to follow. Okay? And in the very first battle of the will that you will face, even before they can speak, will be sleep time. Not as an infant, because they need special care. Okay? But as they get a little bit older and they learn, you put them in their crib and they cry and you come running in and then you hold them the rest of the night, they will own you forever. You have to establish who's in control. Very simply, very practically, I feel like I'm a grandfather here. I'm not yet, nor do I want to be for the next 5 to 10 years, but I'm just saying in that they will own you. Now, I'm not talking about they've messed or they're wet or they have a need or I'm not talking about that. We're not talking about extremes here. We're talking about when they have everything they need. Establish sleep patterns, okay? We didn't know that. We didn't know that with our firstborn, whose name I won't mention. But it only makes sense. Would he rather be in his crib alone or being held and rocked in a rocking chair? Well, of course. And so he learned very quickly, because he's always been very smart, that if I just cry, both of my parents will come running in, pick me up out of this jail, and hug me and keep me warm and hold me and rock me until I fall asleep again. And it was beautiful as new parents. Oh my goodness, what's sweeter than a baby sleeping in your arms? But as he got older, we began to realize, it's possible that he might be in charge here instead of us being in charge. And so we talked to our doctor, who was a Christian doctor. Someone gave us a good book to read and talked about, establishing these patterns. You go in, but you don't say anything. You make sure, all that stuff I don't have time to teach this morning. But what we had to do is we had to let him cry it out. And Joseph, as you heard, I said his name, shoot. I meant my firstborn, of whose name I shall not mention, has a good voice, and he's always had good lungs. And so when we had to just let him be in his crib, and he screamed for an hour and a half the first night. An hour and a half. We lived in an apartment, and there were people above us. So Dory made them a cake and said, we're really sorry about this, but this is something that we need to do. It got so bad that we had to go sit out on the porch because the screaming was so intense. But after that first night, it got less, and the second night, less and less. And now Joseph's, sorry, buddy. I have another one later, too, but that's, our firstborn, once he learned that, has been a great sleeper ever since. Here's the point. It's funny, but the parent has to establish who's in charge in the relationship, because children can't be in charge. That's why they're children. That's why God gave them parents. And I won't even get into the theological aspect of original sin, but if you understand what I'm saying, you know that's true. Actually, I will get into it. Watch. How many of you had to teach your children to disobey? None, right? How many of you draw a line and the first thing they do is go past it? Why? Because something in them wants to disobey. We're all like that. We're all like that. And so you have to discipline your children by way of lifestyle, but you discipline them differently at different stages of their life. Okay? Okay, so children, what is your responsibility? To obey your parents. And maybe I'm old school in this, but children, if you still live at home, you don't have 100% rights to do whatever you want. If you want to have 100% rights to do what you want, then you're very welcome to get a job, find a place to live, and do your thing, okay? But I'm old school in the fact that while we're paying the bills, we're going to set the standards. Now, again, when they're older, you don't set standards of, okay, it's time to go to bed, it's 8 o'clock. Well, that's just stupid, okay? You work with them, you negotiate with them. And because you have discipline at this stage, modeling at this stage, negotiation at this stage, see, it's a process that by the time you get to adult children still living at home, you have this understanding. You have this understanding of what's going on. But children are to obey their parents. And parents must teach their children to obey. Don't set standards that they're incapable of, but willful disobedience, pouring that cup out on purpose, needs to be punished. Disrespect needs to be punished because disrespect is a choice. Children need to learn to respect their parents and to respect people that are older than them. Because if they don't learn it at an early age, they're never going to get it when they get a real job. And the boss tells them to do something, and they say, well, who do you think you are? And the boss says, see ya. Well, I don't know what's the matter with this boss. I know what I'm doing here. Listen, you're 18 years old. You really don't know what you're doing. Okay? Disrespect is a choice. You will not disrespect us. In our home, you can disagree with us. You could even be angry with us, but you weren't allowed to slam the door. You weren't allowed to say, I hate you. That's unacceptable. You can completely disagree with our decision, but you're going to relate it in a proper and in a respectful way. This is a funny story. I have one on Joe, but I'm going to share this on Lindsay. She really wanted a cat. And so one of her friends, they had a kitten with little kittens, very cute. And she really wanted it, and she was of teenage age, and it was on a Friday night, and we said, Linz, Mom and I, seriously, we'll talk about it when you go to youth group. Honestly, we will. So she gets back, and she's like, well, what did you decide? I said, well, Lindsay, sit down. I said, I have good news, and I have bad news. And I said, the bad news is we're not going to get the kitten, but the good news is we are going to keep you. Now, you can't help but laugh at that. You see how I diffused that situation? See how I diffused that situation? Someday it's all going to come back to us. When she chooses, the youngest one chooses where I'm going to spend the last days. I know that's going to come back. You'll get that later. But anyway, disrespect, disobedience needs to be punished. It needs to be taken care of. It's not cute. You're handicapping your child for the rest of their lives. Take care of those things. Don't set standards too high that they can't follow, because it says, fathers, do not provoke your children unto wrath. That just makes them angry because they can't follow those standards. We're not talking perfection. What we're talking about is obedience and respect. And obedience and respect never, ever go out of style. Never, ever. They're always important. Proverbs says, train up the child in the way in which you should go, and when they are older, they will not depart from it. Older children then, what about you even after you're married and you move out of the house? You're still to honor your parents because of who they are in your life. You still never disrespect your parents, although the obedience thing is different. Now, a wise parent with adult children will offer advice when asked, will not put their nose in where it doesn't belong. Now, that's hard if you're an Italian mother. Okay, Italian mothers have a gift, and their gift is they want to be involved in everyone's life. Now, I can't speak for other nationalities, but I do know that that's true. If you're wise, you'll be there to love and support your children no matter what. If they ask for counsel, you'll give it. But once they're married, they have to establish their own standards, their own practices within their home. The best that you can ask for is that they've learned from you and they carry some of those good things into their home, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But for older children, no matter how old you are commanded by God's word to honor your parents and to respect them. Never speak harshly to your parents, harshly in a way that's hurtful to your parents. That's dishonor. But can I just say this, because it's so practical when you think about it. When you cut through all the other examples that some of you already think, well, what about this? When you cut through all of that, if you taught your child at a young age to respect you and older people, well, guess what's going to happen when they get older? They will respect you and honor you. If you didn't teach them respect and honor as a child, they're not going to respect and honor you as an adult. Okay? This is not brain surgery here. Okay? It's hard because it's hard to live that on a daily basis. That's what's exhausting. It's hard. But it's worth it in the long run. Older adult children. I knew this but never had definitive biblical background. But even in times where our parents get older, if they have financial needs, it's the adult children's responsibility to help their parents with a financial need. Now, for some of us and for some of you, I'm kind of strong and harsh. If you're visiting today, I apologize for this. It's just how I relate because I'm not good at beating around the bush. Some of you make more money now than your parents ever thought of making. And that's just because of the economy and education and how things have changed. You make more money than your grandparents could comprehend. Okay? And so part of this understanding is there might come a time where your parents have a need. You have to be there to help them with that need, just like they were there to help you when you had nothing. Now watch what Scripture says. These are Jesus' words. For instance, God says, honor your father and mother, and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of father and mother must be put to death. That's the Old Testament law. There'd be like nobody anymore if we still live by the Old Testament standards. The disrespect I see children pay their parents and adults today, not in Walmart and Target, in church. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Anyway, but you say it's all right for people to say to their parents, sorry, I can't help you, for I have vowed to give to God what I would have given to you. So here's what the religious leaders did. Their parents had financial needs, but they set a certain aside money to say, oh, that money's for God. Well, you don't love God if you don't love your parents. And you can say you love God all you want, but if your parents are struggling and you have the means to help them and you don't, then you don't love God. So kind of keep your religious stuff and do something about it. That's Jesus. The Pharisee said, we can't help our parents because this money is set aside for God. Oh, baloney. That was set aside for their own purposes. Believe me when I tell you. So it is our responsibility to obey as a younger child and to honor them as we grow older. Okay. For the parents, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. And I just broke this down into some simple advice. First of all, be there for your children. I think this generation of parents is very good at that. As an outside observer, I think you're much better at being there for your children than previous generations. Previous generations, children were somewhat of an afterthought in how they were treated. I think it's great that parents are involved in their children's lives, and I commend you on that. Be involved in their lives. Enjoy every moment. Be there for them. Be there for their children's functions when it's possible to do that. Go to their games, go to their school events, go to all of these things. You know, it matters. It matters, and it makes a difference. Be there for them. When I was in middle school, I played on the 7th and 8th grade basketball team, and I was not very good. And so when the game was over, that's when I got into the game. When we were losing by 30 or winning by 30, and there were about 30 seconds left in the game, that's when I got in. We used to joke about fouling somebody just to get our name in the book, because otherwise it would never show up that we even played. But you know, my mom was at every home game. And I remember one time that we were playing an away game, and I remember where it was. It was in Austintown, Ohio, outside of Youngstown, Ohio. And I looked across in the stands, and my dad was there. I didn't know he was coming. He came from work, and he was there. And it was a very close game. I remember it very clearly. I even remember the kid that shot the winning shot. His name was Mike Kane from the top of the key. He hit the winning shot, and we won. But I never played. I never, ever got in the game. But when my dad took me home, told the coach, you know, he's coming with me, and we went out to eat. And my dad never ever said anything about me getting in the game or not getting in the game. Instead, we celebrated the team victory together. And what mattered wasn't that game. What mattered is that he was there, and I knew I mattered. That's what mattered. Because games come and go, and you won't even remember all of them. But see, the reason, then I went on and I played basketball throughout and into college all the way through, and I don't even remember most of the games. And I started playing more, thankfully, as I got older. But anyway, that impacted my life. That's why, however many years later, that was when I was 7th to 8th grade, I'm 51. I mean, that was a long time ago, but I still remember it. That's how important being there is. That's how important. So be there for your children. Be aware. Be there and be aware. Be aware of what's going on in your children's lives, especially as they get older, and I'll say they begin to reach the teenage years. Be aware of what's going on in their life. This is just very practical advice, but know their friends. The Bible teaches bad company corrupts good morals. And if you want to pray for your teenagers, you pray God give them good friends. Good friends. Now, not every friend that they'll meet in church is a good friend, but they have a lot better chance of meeting good friends in church than they do out at parties. That's just a fact. That's just the way that it is. I grew up in church, and most of my friends were in church. I had friends in high school. I wasn't, an outcast in that regard, but I didn't need the friendship of those in my high school because I had the friends of those in church. And so I was able to say no to a lot of things because it didn't really matter whether I was accepted by them or not. Okay. But be aware, know their friends. Let your house be the house that the friends want to come to. If you have to spend money to make that happen, spend money. They want this so they can invite their friends over, go buy it. Because what difference does it make? If they go over someone else's house that doesn't have the same morals and standards that you have, and they ruin their lives in one night, was that $50 that you didn't spend really worth it? Was that $100 that you didn't spend really worth it? Was a few less trips to Starbucks or Wawa really worth it? See, if you have to spend money to provide a home, if you can do it, it's not even about money, but if that comes down to that and you have the resources to do it, make your home the place that kids want to come to, because you'll know what's going on in your house and you can establish those patterns, if just for your children and nothing else. But maybe God is able to use your home as a lighthouse to other families too. So be aware of what's going on. Know their friends. Know their social media habits. If your children are on Facebook, you need to be on Facebook. If they're on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, if they text, tweet, I don't care, however they're going to do it, you have to be a part of that. Especially when they're in their teenage years. They have no rights. There are no privacy rights while I'm paying the bills. Okay? If you're going to get on Facebook, you're going to friend me. And I'm going to know what you're writing. If you're going to get on Twitter, you're going to include me in that so I know what you're writing. And then when you get older and pay your own bills, including your cell phone bill, which you guys are welcome to anytime, then you can decide from there, okay? But know what's going on in their social media habits. If your children are old enough to go out on their own, for us it was when they started going to youth group. They had cell phones. We just didn't do other things so that they could have cell phones. People will say, well, I didn't have cell phones growing up. Well, there's a lot of things that have changed. I mean, none of us rode a horse to church today, did we? Who rode a horse to church today? Anybody? No, things change. That's such a narrow-minded way. We live in a world that communicates digitally. And if you're not involved in that, I can guarantee you your kids are involved in it, and there's a better chance that they're going to be involved in things they shouldn't be because you've decided to bury your head in the sand. Get your head out of the sand. I almost said something worse than that. I'm a preacher, but I'm not completely sanctified. Okay? Get your head out of the sand. If they're old enough to be out of the house, they need a cell phone. They need a cell phone so that they can communicate. Our kids, if they were out, God forbid something should happen, all they had to do was call, and we were right there. They don't know what a telephone booth is. They don't have that. They don't know what, I mean, when was the last time you saw a teenage kid or college-age kid use the house phone? How many of you don't even have a landline because everything you use is on the cell phone? Get your kid a cell phone. Not a little kid, but get your kid a cell phone. Be aware of what's going on in their lives. Know their friends, know their social media habits, know where they are. Have them communicate with you. There's no excuse for it. When I was younger, I had to find a telephone booth. But you know what I did? I did. And I would call my parents if I was going to be out late. You know why? Because they taught me respect. That's why. Okay. Lastly, be a godly example. That's the best gift you can give your children. So I said to Steve and Melissa when they were standing here, just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be all right. You're going to have ups and downs. That's life. You're going to have difficulties. You've faced them before. But this is a couple that wants to raise their children in church. And they came to church before they had children. They'll continue. I just know their hearts. They'll continue to come in church. They were involved before. They'll be involved after. Maybe while the child is an infant, not as much as they will be as the child. You know how it goes. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're a godly parent, you have a better shot at raising godly children. Again, this is not brain surgery. If you're a godly parent, you have a better shot. Does that mean that every godly parent has a godly child? No, because a child is going to make their own decisions. But when I stand before God, I want to be able to say, God, I did everything I possibly could. I did everything. I have no regrets about what I did. I have no regrets about raising my children. I did the very best I could. I want to give them the best shot possible to accept Christ as Lord and Savior and to serve Him all the days of their lives. That's what we try to do with our children. Our children are still, it's hard for them that I'm preaching on parenting. I understand that. But be godly, and you have a better shot at raising godly children. And why is that so important? You know why? Is because my parents raised me in a way to honor God. And so, by God's grace, I didn't make a lot of horrendous decisions that many people of my generation have made as it relates to drugs and alcohol and immorality and all of these other things. I didn't ruin my life, and I didn't ruin anyone else's life. That's why being godly is so important. Okay. What else? Read the Bible. Pray at your meals. Take time to pray at your meals. Don't pray at the kitchen table the way I pray at church. You pray at church, and that's good, but you pray at the table to bless the food, and it's time to eat. And that sounds funny, but the more super spiritual you are, when you know you're not that spiritual, it's a turnoff. Because your child knows that you're a hypocrite. Okay? Just be you. Just pray. Don't put on airs and an act. You can't yell and scream at them, watch filthy movies, and get drunk on the weekends and say, oh, God, we want to invite God's presence into our home. Don't play the game. Be real. Be real with them, because your kids will see through that in a heartbeat. I know, it's a little strong. That's how it goes. Pray at your meals. Pray when they're sick. Just offer a simple prayer. Joseph was about 2 years old, and this is terrible. I apologize, but it's too great a story to let go, and I'll pay the consequences later. He had this little bunny that broke, 2 years old, and he prayed this prayer: Jesus, bunny, boo-boo. That was it. Jesus, bunny, boo-boo. And it was one of the most awesome things ever. Where did he learn to pray? Because we prayed with him every night. I didn't call thou great heavenly. No, Lord, bless my children. Give them a good night's sleep. Help them make the right choices in life. That's all. That's all. Pray with your children and they'll learn. Kenny Williams, I was at Upper Deerfield last week, and he gave a testimony for Thanksgiving that his little son, his name, Isaac. His little son Isaac, 2 years old, cutest little thing. He's like a little mini me, Kenny. And he was sick. And Kenny caught him kneeling down on the ottoman and folding his hands and saying, Jesus, help me feel better. Where did the 2-year-old learn it? He learned it from his parents. So read the Bible. Let your children see you doing that. Maybe read one passage at dinner time or whenever you're all together. You don't have to give a theological lecture, which I'm going to finish with, but read the Bible. Go to church. It really doesn't hurt. I don't know, maybe today has hurt you. I hope it hasn't. We've not tried to make it painful for you, although the longer I go, the more painful I think it is. But we've not tried. Go to church. Bring them to church. Let them learn about the things of God. They'll be okay. It'll be good for them and for you. Be generous. And I don't mean just giving to the church, although that's a part of it, but give to missions, give food. And our church is so generous. Give food on the table. Give to the shoe boxes like we did. Give to missions. Reagan, I need to see you after the service too. It's all good. It's all good. Okay? I just don't want to forget. Give to food. Do these things. Be generous and show your children that you're generous. Not to get glory, but so they can learn. So they can learn. Here's what we did. And we would talk to our kids about, we would do things in front of them so that they would learn, but there were times we'd help people just because that's what God put on, and we would tell them, not for any other reason, that they would learn that. They would learn, wow, let's Let's be generous. Let's help others. And so, lastly, there's an important principle of determining the direction of your life, and it's this: living with the end in mind. And although it seems a little morbid, it's actually a very, very important principle. Live with the idea of what you want people to say at your funeral. Live with that in mind. What do I want people to say at the end of my life? And then make your choices accordingly. Okay? No one ever on their deathbed says, I wish I had spent more time at the office. No one ever says that. David Cassidy, you know who he is? From my generation, you know, he just died. Did you hear what his last words were? He was 67 years old. He said, so much time wasted. So much time wasted. That's what he told his daughter right before he died. Live your life with the end in mind. How do I want to be remembered? When my dad passed away, we didn't say anything at the funeral. There was just so much and so many things going on. But we as the sons and my mom went to his graveside the next day. And we went around from oldest to youngest and said something about our dad. And you know, none of us ever mentioned money. None of us ever mentioned possessions. But we all said, he was a great dad. And he set an example for us to live our lives. My dad lived with the end in mind. I wrote something in June of 2008. I used to do a blog. I should get back to it. But I found this quote. It said, he didn't tell me how to live, he lived. And he let me watch him do it. So this is what I wrote about my dad. In 2008, he was still alive and strong and healthy. Growing up, we didn't schedule family meetings. We called it supper. He didn't schedule times to be together. We went to baseball games together. My dad didn't tell me I had to help others. He just helped others. He didn't tell me I had to go to church. He just went. He didn't tell me I had to love God. He just loved God in front of us. He didn't tell me I had to love the Bible. He just read it and he taught it and he lived it. He didn't tell me I had to love my family. He just loved his. I figure the best things in life aren't taught, they're caught. Love you, Dad. For those that have made mistakes along the way, and we all have, when I say I don't have regrets, I don't have huge regrets, but I wish I could go back and do some things over. I would be a better husband at the early stages of my marriage. I would spend more focused attention and caring for my wife and young children instead of the church that we were trying to get started. If I could go back. I can't. And you can't. But you know what? God gives us the opportunity to start over today. That's all. Start over today and be better into the future. If God has been speaking to your heart about some things that maybe you need to work on, well, start today. Don't just mourn and weep over time that's past and you can't go backwards. Rejoice that he's given you today and he's given you a future that you can do better. Parents, love your children no matter what age they are. Children, honor your parents no matter what age you are. And God will be right there in the middle helping you every step of the way. And all God's people said, amen.